joining me tonight. I'm your host, Spencer Levy, and today joining me is Carl Buck. And we're here just to talk about your life and some interesting things about it. Are you ready to talk?
Fire away. My dad was raised in a small rural community, not in a community, he was raised on a farm about 6 miles from a town called Kingston. Mm-hmm. He rode horseback to school.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
He had an older brother, and his mother passed away when he was very young. The three of them stayed on this farm for several years. Well, that's right. When my dad was growing up, he had appendicitis, and they were 6 miles, again, they were 6 miles out of town, and some old doctor operated on him on the kitchen table, removed his appendix.
Wow.
And he got gangrene from that.
Mm-hmm. How old was he at the time?
Young, 7, 8.
Oh, wow.
It was somewhere about the time that his mother passed away. But he had one tremendous scar for the appendix. I mean, we're talking about wide scar.
I'd imagine, especially at that time.
At that time, there was no anesthetic at all.
I wouldn't imagine so. Did he have any other siblings, or just the brother?
No, just the other brother.
Okay.
And his dad eventually remarried.
Okay.
And who had Cora Buck, or Cora. And I knew her. She was my grandmother, or my grandmother's theoretically step-grandmother, but still, she was my grandmother. She had 3 daughters, and she had between them, they also had one son.
Okay.
Who is 9 months older than I am. Mm-hmm. So I have an uncle who is 9 months older than me.
Interesting how that works.
Yes, you don't think about that. And my dad graduated at an early age of 16.
Oh, wow.
And the interesting event that probably changed his life was a country club. He got a scholarship to play football at Tulsa University. Mm-hmm. Country boy goes to Tulsa. He had a tux and a white shirt and tie. Scared him to death. He came home, took it off, and went back and worked in the oil field for 2 years.
Oh, really? Do you know anything about what transpired there?
He just scared him it was beyond what he felt comfortable.
Wasn't what he was used to. Okay.
Well, what he was used to. He had been riding a horse all the way in to go to school, and now he was at a country club.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what golf was at that time.
Uh-huh.
But his older brother, there was always a rivalry, and my dad always talked about, he wanted to become big enough so that he could punch out his brother.
Did he succeed in that?
He got big enough to do it, and when he did, he said, I don't want to do it now. And his brother changed his life, because his brother went down to East Texas and said, you cannot just continue to be working in an oil field being a roughneck. You still got all 10 fingers. And he helped him get a scholarship to play football at a small junior college at Tishomingo, Oklahoma. And he played football 1 year there. Then he got a scholarship to Southeastern, which was where my mother was. Well, she was born in Marietta, Oklahoma, and her parents moved to Ardmore. My granddad, he was the county treasurer for Love County, and he moved to Ardmore, and he audited schools. My mother was the first in her family to go to college. She went to Southeastern. It's probably, at the time, about a 2-hour ride, which was about 60 miles.
Okay.
So it was called a teacher's college. That's what it was noted for. And that's where my mom and dad met. My dad had not very much money. because when he would work in the summer, take all of his money, buy all of his clothes that he needed for the year. I'm talking about underwear, socks, everything he needed.
Every year he would get a new wardrobe then?
Well, he'd get more underwear.
Okay, got it.
He didn't have money for things like textbooks. And he, by chance meeting, he happened to sit next to a young lady. And he grabbed her textbook and started reading from it. And she grabbed it back. And they got married 4 years later, or approximately 4 years later.
So they just met in the class?
They met in a classroom, and a chance meeting of him sitting by there and grabbing her textbook because he didn't have any money. She was an interesting person too. She went 2 years to college.
Okay.
And you could come out with a degree in education and start teaching with only 2 years of education.
It's really quick. Okay.
And her first job was outside near Ardmore, and it was about 20 miles out of town, which was at that time, you could remember, 35 or 40 mile an hour. So it was a long ways out there, and it was cold in the 20s.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
And the story I remember her talking about is that her father would heat the bricks and put them the next door to her feet so that she would be warm enough to drive all the way out to the school. We think times are tough now, and people have lots of stories about how tough we are. My dad graduated in 1929, start of the Depression. 206 graduated in his class. 6 got a job.
Wow, that is not a great percentage.
There was a fellow who ran the general store who was the chairman of the Board of Education for, I don't know, for at least 30 years. But he hired my dad, and my dad bought a ice house from him. That was their first house that my mom and that they had. He added on to it, so it was very thick walls and well insulated. I go back to my dad. He got his first check. He did this, and he was making $90 a month. But this was the Depression, and the school districts had no money. He would take his check, drive 35 miles to the county seat, go to a department store, and the owner of there was taking the checks. He would discount it to $75 cash.
In case they couldn't pay it?
Well, because they couldn't.
Okay.
The school districts were all broke. They had no money.
So he could get a discount of getting some of the money.
He got some of his money. And you can imagine, you're working and you're not getting all the money. But at least you were one of the 6.
One of the lucky ones. Yeah.
It was probably the highlight of the Depression was October 1st, 1937. That's when I was born.
Okay. Good. Just a happy coincidence.
Happy correlation. That was on a Saturday in 1937 because my dad was still the football coach, and he was scouting. Ryan was playing Leon in a football game, and that's a town of about 30 or 40 miles from Fox. And my mom was in the car, and he was in the stands scouting the team. And she felt that the baby was coming, she would flash the lights. So somewhere midway in that game at Ryan, Oklahoma, she flashed the lights, and they tore off Hellbent for Leather to Ardmore, and that next morning, I was born at Hardy Sanitarium.
Okay.
I don't know why it was a sanitarium.
Okay.
But it was Hardy, it was a hospital, but they called it Hardy Sanitarium.
But it was a hospital. Okay, interesting.
To the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
what do you remember about your father then? About the relationship with him?
He was a school teacher, and he was a coach, and I was growing up, he was a football coach, and he let me go out, and I was kind of the mascot of the local football team. He ran the school, and he did everything from, he had bus systems that they ran. He was the history teacher. He was the band director for 1 year, and he could not carry a tune. But he was the band director at the same time, as well as the high school principal, as well as the superintendent. He became superintendent when I was when I started the 7th grade.
Okay, gotcha.
Before then, he was not. We lived a long ways from school. We lived about, I'd say about a 7-iron and a 5-iron away from the schoolhouse.
Okay.
I had to walk all the way across the highway to go to school and cross a little, we called it a stile, to go over the fence. It was an oil field community. There were one street, one highway going through the middle of, I guess you could say middle of town. No stoplights, not even a caution light, not even a caution sign to slow down. And that was it. And there was a large general store, and that was it too. A school that you could do anything in. And it was small enough that you could do any kind of possibilities. You could be in any kind of club, singing the chorus, which I did, in the band, which I did, in junior and senior play, which I was.
So you were a little bit of everything.
And you played football, basketball, or track. That was the only 3 sports they had.
So when did you start football then?
I started in 9th grade. We didn't lose a game as an 8th grade, didn't lose a game as freshmen. We lost 3 games when I was a sophomore and 2 games as a junior, and I never lost another game.
Wow. Yeah.
Including going to college. Well, in high school I was a halfback, and I was also outside linebacker.
Okay.
And in college I played end and outside linebacker.
Okay.
On a September day in 1951, the most important thing that ever happened to me is that I was in a band hall, and they brought in this young lady who was dressed in a tan skirt, white blouse, penny loafers, white socks. And I said, this girl is beautiful, obviously a senior.
Okay.
And she played saxophone, which was also very near to where I played baritone horn. So I was very close, sat next to her. And I found out after a little bit, and she was in some of my classes, that she really wasn't a senior. She was a freshman also.
Okay.
We went to that spring, there was a band contest at Waurika, Oklahoma, probably in February or March, because flowers were coming out, and it was down along the creek, and they had a Ferris wheel. I ran out at 10 cents a ride. I
ran out of money.
I ran out of money, but before I ran out of money, I had my first kiss, and it was it changed my life.
And you spent the rest of your life with her, as much as
More or less, we dated, and I always knew that she was the one. I just knew, but we dated other people.
Okay.
And then we got married,
And what do you remember what year that was?
yes, it was. It was in 1959.
Okay.
In Memorial Day, so I was had to be May 30th, and I'm sure it's Friday or Saturday. I took the best job offer I had, which was the only one I had.
Okay. Funny enough.
And in fact, I love to tell the story that I've interviewed with Texas Instruments 3 times, and each time they always said one thing: "We'll be right back with you." and I'm still waiting for that first call. But I had a job with General Electric that was on a 3-year manufacturing training program. And I don't know why they would hire me, but because you hired engineers, you worked in jobs every 6 months. You would change jobs. You would at least every year you would change locations.
Okay.
And you would also go to class 2 nights a week, which it was basically a master's in business administration that we took at night.
Well, that must have been quite tumultuous to hold down.
We moved around. We started off in Richland, Washington. I thought Richland, Washington, you got to remember I'm a dumb Okie, and I thought Washington was a place that had rained all the time, beautiful scenery, mountains. And there is a desert in Richland, in Washington State, the center of the state. Okay. It was 103 when we came over the hills.
That must have been quite a shocker for you.
Was because no houses were air conditioned.
Okay.
And we rented a house. We thought we'd be able to get a furnished house, but they didn't have any furnishings there. The only thing we had was a washer, dryer, coffee table, and a TV, black and white.
You have all the necessities right there.
Right there. After you got out of that program, you had to interview again. We had lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, and in Johnson City, which is in the Tri-Cities area in upstate New York, cold, 30 degrees below.
Wow.
We decided we wanted to move back to the Southwest, but GE was also opening a plant in Oklahoma City. And I said, I'd like to get there. And they said, well, there's no openings. I said, fine. And I quit. We came back to Oklahoma, new jobs, got to travel a lot. We got to see a lot of friends that we had known in college. And Patsy was just happy as all get out. And I had an opportunity to get another job in Arkansas City, Kansas. And I talked her into going, and she went yelling and screaming to Kansas. And we just were having a great time. And she would have stayed there the rest of we would have never left there. We spent from 68 until early 70, and then they had some drop off in work, and I got let go. And they were helping me finding it. GE was so good, they helped you find another job. And I had an opportunity to move to Oakland, California, Cincinnati, Davenport, Iowa. Patsy came to me and said, we're not going to be continuing to move. You got to remember now, when I first saw her in Fox, Oklahoma, that was her 14th school she had been in.
So she'd been moving around a very long time.
And she was a freshman. She wanted stability. And I can appreciate that.
That's
that was a major change in my life when she put her foot down, and it changed all of our lives. We started interviewing, and I looked at Oklahoma City, and I could have gone back there, but Oklahoma City has limited market. And I had an opportunity with a place in Dallas, and I took a job there. Patsy wanted to live in Carrollton in a community that was by a country club, because she liked the idea of playing tennis and country club life. And I always was raised in the country. And I insisted, and I pressured her, and we built a house. And it was in Highland Village, a little town, Highland Village. And it had a country feel. It was so far out of town that you could not get a conforming loan. You had to pay higher rates and a shorter term loan. The job played out, and I got another job with a company called University Computing, and that lasted until, I was kind of unhappy with the general manager playing around with the secretary, and I made a few comments. So I'm looking for a third job. And this one really, there's one of them that really, there were 3 things that changed my life on this decision. One of them, it was a construction company, and I knew nothing about construction. We were building townhouses in large production. I found out real quickly he hired me because of my experience of plans, of how can you build something faster. And I quickly learned if you don't pay someone, they do not like to work for you.
Okay.
And
a good philosophy.
he had a great concept. He had townhouses scattered all around. This was in late 60s, which is a new concept to have townhouses anywhere. And he had them scattered all over the Dallas Metroplex. But he went broke.
Okay.
But that was significant. The fella, the savings and loan said, I'd like for you to stay here and help manage it until we get them to fix it. The other thing that changed me was that there were 3 of us that managed these companies. I did the Carrollton when someone had the Arlington when someone had the Garland one. And we got together, the 3 of us, and said, let's form a construction company and build houses.
Okay.
And so we went to the president of the savings and loan, and I cannot to this life remember his name, but I'm going to find out someday. He said, I will not loan the 3 of you money together, but I will loan each one of you enough money to build 2 houses. And he did this without knowing our credit, about anything other than he had just knew of us and dealt with us on what we did, because we didn't have any money. Well, I had my GE stock, and I think I may have had at best $1,000 in the bank. And he loaned me enough money to build 2 houses.
Why did you do this then? Just because of the
Because he
interaction
liked
with
us.
it? Okay.
That changed my life because I started building houses and built over 600, probably almost 700 homes over the next 35 years.
Yeah, and you kept this up for a while.
I did. And it was fun because we grew it to where we were doing it. I was doing it all by myself sometimes, and then during that time period, another thing that changed was that Patsy decided to, well, first of all, we needed money. And she got a job. When she was in Kansas, she got her license to be a Montessori, and she became the headmistress of the very first Montessori school in Louisville.
Okay.
And she ran that for a number of years. She quit later, and she decorated houses, and we did it all ourselves and hired people. I mean, I was a very quiet, unassuming person who was shy. Surprising. And when I was
That sure changed.
that did change. But that changed only after I got confidence in myself with running a business. Even when I was working for other corporations, I was very quiet. There were times when you never knew whether or not you were going to make, on Monday, I never knew whether I was going to have money to pay my bills on Friday.
That's a scary feeling. Yeah.
I always paid my labor force first, and they all got paid on Friday. Now, many cases they would get paid after 3 o'clock. I knew that after 3 o'clock, that money would not hit my bank account till Monday, and I had until 4 o'clock on Monday to have money.
To actually have the money,
have money
to pay
in the
them.
bank. Right?
So you have time to get your affairs in
The
order.
word is float. And there's a lot of interesting things happened. Let's see, that one was when I built a house on the wrong lot.
How'd you explain that one?
I set it on the lot, one lot over.
Which just happened to be open. I
Oh, it
guess.
was open.
Okay.
And Harold McMullen came to me and said, by the way, I thank you for building that house for me. But he was really good. I bought the lot next door that was still empty, thank God.
Okay.
And we closed on that house.
Okay.
And the other one, I was building 30, 35 houses a year, which is 2 or 3 houses of closings every month.
That's pretty quick. Yeah.
We were really busy, growing like crazy, and we built a house. I go to close on it. I bought the lot, but I'd never taken out a loan.
Okay.
I built the whole house out of pocket and never knew it until I went to close it. I'm much more meticulous now.
I would assume so after something like that. Yeah.
Those are some.
Okay. Yeah.
But about that time, the ex-mayor of Louisville said, I've got these lots up here. They were really pretty cheap. And he says, build something on there. And we built 30,000 square feet. And now we've got over 300,000 square feet of these office places. That's the reason I'm here today, because without that, I would have, for having $2,000 to start, I ended up a lot better.
You certainly landed on your feet. Yeah.
I did. And the other most important thing was in late 90s when Alex a band scholarship at SMU.
I didn't know that element. Okay.
Yeah.
But what did he play?
He played baritone horn.
Okay.
And it was really good. He also had the same number of job opportunities I did when he came out of college. And he took it. And he had moved to Atlanta and met a girl there. And they got married. And he had to promise his mother-in-law that he would not ever move her out of Atlanta, which was not true.
But that promise didn't last very long.
It did not last long. He had moved back to Dallas, and he was going to look like the job opportunity would change. And he came and says, I think we could make it building houses together.
Was that an easy decision for you to like invite him?
Yeah, he came to work for us, and I immediately borrowed money from him to make payroll. So he could be paid. But we did, and we kept right on building houses, and but we also we saw the process of having of building these office warehouse spaces, our businesses.
Quivira Enterprises.
Quivira Enterprises. This is the managing.
You've mentioned a lot of turning points in your life. Is there any other ones that you've we haven't talked about?
I lost the love of my life, and that changed my. And she wanted me to keep on going, or I wouldn't be out here.
And you're still here with us going.
I'm still here, and I miss her so every day.
And I'm sure she's still watching us, though.
I hope so.
Hey, I love you.
I love you too. Thank you for never doing this.